All right, hey everybody, Dan Kroll here for episode 7 of the Britt, Kanawha, West Hancock Athletics podcast. April 1st, I talked with Jim and Mark Timmerman. It was a nice, smooth flowing talk with those two, talking about baseball, football, Coach Sanger, being the AD at Britt. Mark told some great stories too about growing up with the Sanger boys. One of them's here right now and playing in the state football finals, among other things. If you want to watch any of those episodes, go to my YouTube page. It's just Dan Kroll. It's the one with the orange D, not the purple one. I messed up and accidentally recorded one with my school email, so go to the orange one. Thanks everyone for watching those. As of this morning, those first 6 interviews have over 2,300 views, so thanks again for watching. I'm just glad we can all reconnect with each other about Britt and West Hancock and Kanawha. I have Rick Sanger on today. I'm challenging Rick. On January 13th, I interviewed Kevin, and he has 502 views in about 3 months. So Rick's goal is to promote and get this at least 500 views in the first 3 months. So like I said, I have Rick Sanger on here. He's the second of the 4 Sanger boys. So thanks for coming on tonight, Rick.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I appreciate it.
But before we get to Rick, though, I'm going to do a quick rundown of the West Hancock athletic seasons that are currently taking place. We'll start with boys track and Coach Welp. They placed second at the Bob Sanger Relays on the 5th of April. We were 10 points behind Lake Mills at that meet. Colin Ford won the 100, Braden Walk won the 2 and the 400, Jake Wood won the 800, Briar Subject won the 110 hurdles, Matthew Francis won the 400 hurdles, Nolan Vasky won the high jump, Parker Means won the disc. We won the 4x2 8 medley and the shuttle hurdles. On the 6th, they went to Eagle Grove. Didn't have team scores, and I didn't see any events on varsity bound, but there was a lot of larger schools there. It sounds like they did all right. And last night they were at Iowa Falls Alden, and I did not see any results as of this afternoon on that. Hurdles track, Coach Mark Sanger on April 5th. They also competed at the Bob Sanger Relays, and they won the meet with 156 points. They beat Belmont by 27. Olivia Moore won the 1500. Kennedy Kelly won the 400 hurdles. Moore and Hayden Lang took 1 and 2 in the 3000. Quinn Harley won the long jump. Mallory Lear won the high jump. Carly Bruns won the shot, and Ann Horseman won the discus. And then as relays, we won the 4x1, 4x2, 4x4, and both medleys. On the 8th, they went to Eagle Grove, got 6 out of 8 teams. All I saw there was Shea Smith winning the 100 hurdles, Kennedy Kelly winning the 400 hurdles, Mallory Lear winning the high jump, Morgan Francis won the disc, and then the 4x2 and 4x4 we got first as well. This Friday, they go to Garrigan. The boys golf team, Coach Goebel, on the 9th, they went to Groose, my old stomping grounds, had a triangular against North Iowa and North Union where they took 3rd with a 213. North Union shot a 185. North Iowa shot a 193. Credit most of that to my brother who's helping out with the golf team there at North Iowa. Max Kumscher shot 51, took 8th. Isaac Goebel was also 8th with the 51. Justin Osborne was 12th with the 55. Alex Marks 13th with a 56. Julian Calles and Jordan Abley shot 78 each, and I'm sorry if I butchered those names. I wasn't real confident in how to say those. On the 12th, they went back to Britt on their home course for a triangular against Garner and Eagle Grove. They got 2nd with a 200. There were 16 shots behind Garner. I didn't see any individual stats posted for that. And girls golf, I haven't seen any results from them on varsity bound. Guessing they had a few canceled or rescheduled meets. Their first meet, though, it looks like, is on the 16th at Rice Lake against Lake Mills and Forest City. All right, before we get to Rick here, just want to remind people that the Sanger Legacy Fund was created to honor the late, great Coach Bob Sanger and his wife and former teacher, Mrs. Linda Sanger. They both taught and coached at Britt and West Hancock for over 50 years and impacted, obviously, thousands of lives. The Legacy Fund raises money to help the communities of Britt and Kanawha and the West Hancock School, and more specifically, the athletic programs and activities. Please consider giving. Go to sangerstrong.com to donate. On the Mankato Area Foundation site, we have that linked up to sangerstrong.com. And I just learned you can set up recurring payments if you'd like to automate your giving to that. And we do have sponsors tonight. Pretty familiar people, Jan and Jim Timmerman. I was talking to Mr. Timmerman and Mark on the last podcast, and they were actually in Indianola last weekend, so they invited me over to hang out with them, and he donated to the Sanger Legacy Fund. And so they're our sponsors tonight. So thank you to the Timmermans for doing that. If you'd like to sponsor, just donate and let me know, and I'll have you announced on the next episode. Speaking of singers, here we go. Rick, let's get to it. Let's just start with how you're doing, where you guys are at these days, how the wife and kids are, all that good stuff.
We're doing well. Yeah, we're doing well. We're down here in Waukee. Actually, Urbandale is where we live. We're in the Waukee School District. I'm at home still, working from home like a lot of other people are through the whole COVID pandemic. Danielle's works in long-term care pharmacy, so she's been one of those essential employees that's been going into the pharmacy every day. But we're staying busy. I have twin daughters, Avery and Kenley, are sixth graders, getting towards the end of their sixth grade year here at Waukee. So yeah, things are good.
Were they at home at all for school, or did they go mostly in person?
They went before Christmas. We were at home, for part of the fall. And then they went back. I believe it was December. I want to say the first week of December, they went back to in-person classes. And then after Christmas break, they've been in person the whole time. So that's I think it's been good for all of us getting back to in-person classes.
Yep, I'm a teacher. I can tell you firsthand, online learning is not the same.
Yep.
Doesn't equate. So, so just like all the other podcasts, I'm gonna ask questions and ask you to tell stories and all that good stuff. We're gonna talk Britt, West Hancock sports and Central football and track and your parents and all sorts of good stuff. So, just talk to us about growing up in Britt, elementary, middle school. What would you guys do for fun back in the day, growing up in Britt in the mid '80s?
Well, a lot of, for my family, a lot of it was revolved around school. We spent a lot of times at the high school, whether it's in the gym, at athletic events, whatever it might have been. And then, of course, for us growing up out on the acreage, we did a lot of outside stuff. We were, BB guns, three-wheelers, playing catch, footballs, baseballs, all that kind of good stuff. And obviously with hanging out with friends in town, we'd even, we're about 3 miles out of town. We'd ride bikes sometimes into town on the gravel, and just to get together. We'd have friends out at our place all the time, and with us four boys, we'd have some kind of activity. It seems like going on all the time, and of course, Dad would try to keep us busy, whether that's painting a fence or mowing the lawn, weed eating around buildings, loading hogs, working with livestock, all that kind of good stuff. So, as some of the, previous people have said, it's, a lot of outside stuff. We spend a lot of time outside doing things and staying busy. So it was a lot of ways. I'm not sure if most of it is age. As you get older, you recognize that life's not quite as simple as it used to be, but in a lot of ways it was a, simpler time, at least when we were a lot younger,
Yep. And we didn't have all the technology around to consume us like it does anymore for
That's right.
a lot of people.
Constant stream of information.
Yep. Not even younger people. It's us too. Sometimes I get consumed on it. So, how about Mark's Pizza? You ever make it up to that place once in a while?
Oh boy, I tell you, I've eaten a lot of Mark's pizzas from back over the years. So pepperoni and mushroom, that was always a staple. So
they've been out of that place for almost 20 years, and I still every year at Hobo Days, people still bring it up. That's kind of the
ask about Mark's Pizza. Yep.
Oh yeah, yep, definitely. So just to give people some perspective on Rick growing up, 91 was your football senior season, and I just looked this up a few minutes ago. The top song of 1991, "Everything I Do for You" by Bryan Adams. I'm sure that's what you listen to before games to get pumped up. And then the top movie was Terminator 2: Judgment Day. So to give people a little perspective on your days growing up, those were the top names and top stuff of the day. So one thing Rick and I were talking about getting ready for this was I wanted to break down each of the sports you played. So we're going to start with baseball. It was a little harder to find some baseball stuff. It was a lot of sifting through things, but one thing I found with your high school career is that you're a catcher and then you also pitched. One article I found is you had a no-hitter through 5 innings against Clear Lake back in 1990. Tell us about your days playing baseball. I know Coach Timmerman was just kind of hanging up the cleats of his coaching cleats between your probably sophomore, junior year. What do you remember about playing baseball in high school?
Well, I had a lot of fun doing it. Yeah, Coach Timmerman, I think my freshman year was his final year.
Okay.
And then Kevin Ziesman, who was a coach at Kanawha, had coached, I think, in the Kanawha district before we consolidated. He took over for my sophomore and junior years. And then, Coach Sickles had, he took over for our senior year. So Coach Ziesman was there for 2 years. And then with Sickles for my senior year. But yeah, we had some good seasons. We had some ups and downs over the 4 years that I was in baseball. And some of it, coaching changes. There's always, players getting accustomed to new coaching styles and just kind of the transition. My freshman year is unfortunately or fortunately maybe one of the most memorable things. We had a pretty good baseball team. My brother Kevin was a senior, and I did some catching that year. And I think it was Steve Matson was the starting catcher, and I think he got hurt. So I was catching a game, and it was against Northwood Kensett. And they were a good team. I think they were at the top of the conference, and we were battling in a game. And my brother Kevin was pitching, and I was catching, and he was pitching very well. I had a really good game going, and we were tied up after 7 and went into extra innings. And I don't remember all the details of the situation, but I was on base coming around. And as I came through home plate, the catcher was blocking home plate, and I didn't step on it, and the umpire wound up calling me out. We lost the game. It was there's a play that occurred in the field, and I got called out for missing home plate, and Kevin's never let me forget about that. So that
Nor should he. Yeah.
I say unfortunately, it was one of my most memorable times during that freshman year. But and had a good team. A lot of the guys that played in that team. My brother Kevin and Joel Jurdy and a lot of those guys that played in a lot of the other sports. That we looked up to. So it was it was me kind of starting to cut my teeth in getting into some of the high school athletics. Sophomore year, then we had Coach Ziesman take over, went through our consolidation with that had been 89. Would have been I think you said it was 90 or 89 when I think it was my junior, I guess, when I had the game at Clear Lake. But sophomore year, we had the consolidation, had a lot of new faces combining between Britt and Kanawha. And I think we had some ups and downs that year. I don't know where we finished record-wise, but we had a little success there. Junior year then was really a really memorable year. We had some of the seniors that I wound up playing with. I remember Tim Raber. A lot of guys that were my class played during that year, and we ended up. I remember one game in particular earlier in the season we were playing. It was Woden Crystal Lake, and I'd gone to Boise State, and I think it was the first game back from Boise State. I started pitching, and it didn't go very well. We had about 3 or 4 different pitchers that threw that game, and I think we ended up getting beat. And this isn't an exaggeration. We got beat 29-1.
Oh, geez.
It was the wheels came off in that game, and we went on, and then we really settled in, and we wound up putting a bunch of wins together, and we ended up tying for the conference that year. Nice. I think we ended up it was 4 or 5 conference games we had to win in a row at the end of the season. We had to beat, I know like Osage was a big game towards the end of the year. North Iowa we had to beat, Forest City we had to beat, and we squeaked out those wins and got a share of the conference. So that was a lot of fun that year. And then we got to my senior year. We had a lot of guys coming back that were played as juniors and even younger. Some of the younger classes. We had a good year. We didn't win the conference. I want to say we finished second in the conference my senior year. And then we made a pretty good run in the playoffs. We went through. I think we won a first round game, and then we won a second round game against Eagle Grove, which was really exciting. I know Nate Schreur had just posted a a video on Facebook here not too long ago, a few months back, on there was a play where, excuse me, we had I think it was a tie ball game. They had brought in a guy from a pitcher from Eagle Grove named Chris Allen that we competed with, or I competed with in a lot of different sports. And he threw gas. He was a really good pitcher. And I think it was John Madsen was on third base. And I think, I want to say it was Jeremy Abbas who was batting. And the pitcher tried to throw a pickoff down to third base, overthrew it. We scored, win the game by a run. So that was a very memorable game. And then we went on to play. It was Garrigan, I think, in the district final. So we were, we win that game, and we're another game, from state. If we'd win another game, but we got beat. Played up there at Bancroft. So in the old, the old field up there in Bancroft. Coach Timmerman talked about Bancroft, St. John's, and all the history in baseball. But we played. So we played Garrigan there and got beat 1-0. Real well played game. We just couldn't quite score enough runs to get it done. But it was a good season that year as well. So it was a lot of fond memories of playing baseball.
Yep. Who was pitching that 1-0 loss? Do you remember who was the pitcher? That was it you?
Oh, pitcher's Jared. No, see, I did pitching. I pitched probably my pitch was probably my sophomore year, and then junior year a little bit. My senior year, I didn't pitch much at all. We had so Jeremy Abbas and Benji Schreur were two of our main pitchers. Those two were pretty good, and they rotated most of the time. Kevin, myself, and Kevin Eisman, he had done some pitching too when we were mostly younger, and I think he did a little bit as we got to the older years, but mostly he was an infielder, and then I was a catcher. As we got to our junior and senior years.
Yeah, you only give up one run, you expect to win the game. That's got to be a little heartbreaking to not get any runs behind you. All right, let's jump into wrestling. I know 3 of the 4 of you Sanger boys were pretty decent wrestlers. So, I had a lot of fun looking up some of this stuff. Your freshman year, 88-89, you were 13-12, 4th in the conference. But then when I was reading some articles, you got sick before sectionals and couldn't compete at sectionals. What happened there? Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, it was me kind of being a stupid freshman in a few ways. So I'd gotten sick, like with just the flu or something, and I got really dehydrated. Didn't take care of myself enough and hydrate enough. And then I wound up getting mono. So we went through the latter part of the wrestling season. So I had a couple duels, and I remember one duel in particular. We were up at Forest City, and I was supposed to have a forfeit. I was wrestling 160, and we got to Steve Kelly wrestled right in front of me. He was a 152 pounder. So what they did is they forfeited to Steve at 152 and bumped the wrestler up to 160. So I'm sitting there in my sweats with, nothing underneath, no singlet on, not even ready to wrestle. And then I had to run back to the locker room, throw on my singlet and come back out and wrestle. And I wasn't prepared for it. And that was kind of the time when I was starting to go through I was kind of sick at that time. And I remember that in the middle of it not that triggered it, but it was a very memorable event. So I came back out and I squeaked out a victory, I think, against the kid. It was like 4-0 or something. And then a week later, it was my neck got about this big when the gland started swelling, and I missed sectionals and couldn't. I did wrestle at the conference tournament actually that year. I didn't wrestle at sectionals, and there was a senior from Lake Mills named Andy Bowman that I could never beat that year. He kind of beat the tar out of me, but it was my sectional and district looked pretty promising behind him. I could, the idea was could follow him through, but never got a chance to do it because I got sick, and then I got my wisdom teeth out shortly thereafter, and ended up getting dry sockets infected. After the wisdom teeth was out, so it was about a 3 or 4 week period that was worth forgetting.
Yeah, no kidding. Yep. And then your sophomore year, so 89 and 90, you went 22-10, got 3rd at districts. How close were you? I didn't give specifics about like were you Did you lose in overtime and then lose a wrestle back? How close were you to going to state that year?
Yeah, that was, I should have been wrestling a state tournament that year. There's a kid from Garner Hayfield that I wrestled a couple times that year, and he was kind of the guy that I had to beat to make it through tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
His name was Jim Dietrich, and he had beaten me early in the season, like 13-5 at the duel, and then towards the end of the season, I'd beaten him in the conference tournament, and then I beat him in the sectional tournament. And there was a guy from Osage named Tony Damon who I couldn't beat that year, wrestled him about 5 or 6 times. So he was gonna win sectional and districts, and I was gonna follow him through. Well, best laid plans. I was working out through sectionals, and I got to first round of districts and didn't wrestle very well at all. I wrestled a kid from Eagle Grove and got beat in a match that to this day I feel like I shouldn't have lost that match, but didn't wrestle well. As it goes, and that was a big motivator. Going into my junior year.
Yeah, because your junior year, 30-43, state runner-up at 189 pounds. I pulled up the results of the state tournament that year, and I'll go through some of the names and towns where they're from, see if that brings up any good memories for you. In the first round of state your junior year, you beat Greg Romberg of Sheldon by pin. In the quarters, you pinned Franny Greiner. I'm not sure if that was really his name.
I think it was Frank Greiner.
From Washington. In the semis, you won 8-3 against Chuck Stevie from Clarinda. And then the state championship match, you lost 12-5 to Kurt Heidman of New Hampton. What do you remember from that junior run to the state championship match?
Yeah, well, it's funny because a lot of the wins, some of the losses are much more memorable than the wins, unfortunately. The kid from Sheldon, I actually had wrestled early in the season at the Algona tournament, and I'd beaten him, and it was a little closer match then. And in the finals of that tournament, I actually got pinned my junior year in a 3/4 Nelson, no less, by a kid from Albert Lee. So my friends, wrestling teammates, always continue to give me a hard time about that, even to this day. I remember seeing me getting rolled over in a 3/4 Nelson and pinned. But so I ended up going through sectionals, going through districts. I guess it was actually probably some of the best wrestling I had done throughout high school. Wrestled pretty well through sectionals and districts, and then wrestled the guy from Sheldon who had wrestled at the Algona tournament early in the season, and I guess handled him. Wrestled pretty well first round of the state tournament. And then, it was just kind of a whirlwind that year. He hadn't been down there before. You get into Vets Auditorium with the crowd, and the 8 mats going, and it's pretty exciting stuff. And then in the quarterfinals wrestled the kid from Washington who had a really good record, and I think was rated ahead of me, and I'm not sure if I was even rated the way they did ratings back then going into the state tournament. Ended up wrestling pretty well against him, getting a W, and then wrestled the kid from Clarinda, who again was a pretty good wrestler. I remember him being very tall. He's very tall, lanky. I always had kind of trouble wrestling the tall and lanky wrestlers. Got I think it was like a 8-3 match, something like that, in the semifinals, and I just remember the feeling of just crazy excitement, getting through the semifinal match, and you're wrestling in the finals of the state tournament that year. Just a lot of emotions going with it, and it was an exciting time. I still remember looking over in the crowd, and Steve Kelly was in the stands, and he gave me a fist pump, and giving him a fist pump back after the semifinal match. And then kind of as you talked to, or as you alluded to, going to the finals, wrestled a kid from New Hampton, Curtis Heidemann. He was a returning state champ. He'd actually won the 171-pound bracket the year before, which I would have hoped I would have been wrestling in. Didn't make it down there though that year before. He kind of tore me apart on the feet. He took me down, and I'd escape, and and I couldn't get a takedown on him and get the opportunity to to wrestle with him on the mat much. So he kind of took it to me, but fortunately I was able to get in that finals match and have that experience. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. I had put in my notes, you didn't even wrestle at sectionals your freshman year, and then didn't even get out of districts your sophomore year, then go all the way to state championship matches. Pretty big feat at that point. And then going into your senior season, 91-92, 36-1, state runner-up again. State tournament that year, you pinned Brett Dudley of North Polk in the first round. In the quarters, you pinned Dan Gordon from Sydney in just 32 seconds. In the semis, 10-1 against Bob Leakley of Kingsley. And then in the finals, overtime loss 6-4, Wade Crozy, I think that's how you say his last name, Clarksville, Allison Bristow. Again, what do you remember from that senior season?
Obviously, finals match. There's a lot of details in there that I remember, and I know it was just posted out there on the Pin Doctor's site here not too long ago. And I haven't been able to bring myself yet to even watch it all the way through. And so that was a tough one. It's a tough one to lose. It was, but the experience of it was, the state tournament was great. Just showing you a picture here. That was that year we went down there. 4 of us went down there, and we came away with fourth place or 3 runners up, fourth placer in Chad Trolson, and we came away with runners up team wise. So that was really exciting. It was. I remember those first couple of rounds, just, all of us. I mean, Wano John he would be on the mat a little bit before us, because Chad was at 171, I was at 89, and then Kerry Meyer was at heavyweight. Mm-hmm. And John he'd get his match done and he'd kind of be off, and and then Chad would be coming on the mat, and we'd have coaches going every which direction, because we'd have pretty much 3 of us wrestling at the same time. Just I remember the first round, it was I wrestled a kid that the match didn't last that long, and Chad had I think about every one of his matches at the state tournament was a 1-2 point match or an overtime match. He just had a bunch of barn burners, and he persevered. He worked through it and came out with a victory. Toughed it out in a lot of those cases. And the kid that he got beat. So Chad got beat first round, and so that was kind of a bummer. We're like, oh man, we lost one of us. And then he wrestled all the way back. He came the backside. All the way back, wrestling that 3rd and 4th place match, and and got beaten in that 3rd and 4th place match. We got 4th, and he was just wrestling a ton of matches, and it was exciting for us to follow that and watch it and go to consolations on that Saturday. Watch consolation round. It was a ton of fun. And then we had Saturday night in the finals, we had Wano, myself, and Kerry that were all in the finals. So we had. There's a lot of buzz. We were just a lot of excitement going on. There was no way Lisbon won it that year. There's no way we were going to be able to catch Lisbon.
Yeah, I saw that.
We were hoping to get at least one of us get a W and bring home a gold medal. Wano wrestled it, ran into a buzzsaw. One of the Light boys, I think it was Zach Light from Lisbon, he wrestled in the final. Then I wrestled Wade Cruzy from Clarksville. And Cruzy was actually a returning state champ, so he'd won it in 1A the year before, and we were in 2A the year before, and then we moved on to 1A. So I got the pleasure of wrestling, returning state champs both years. But unfortunately, my senior year was. I mean, he was a good wrestler. Not to take anything away from him, he was a great wrestler. He went on, did well in college and stuff. But it's one of those matches that. You still think about to this day, 30 years later, that you didn't feel like you should have lost. And then Kerry, Beef Meyer in the final, he got beat by a kid from Woodbury Central. That actually I think he went on to play football and stuff at BB, and ran into him a few times in college, and he played in Shrine Bowl, so kind of got to know him. Matt Sauer was his name. So, we all obviously get to state finals. You're wrestling good kids. And we were, three of us, we were out of the four of us hoping to bring home a championship.
Mhm.
Didn't quite get there. But boy, I tell you, it was a fun experience. And if you ask any of those guys, I think, just the experience of being down here in Des Moines, Coach DeLeon, Ron Finch was there helping and assisting. Dan Potza, those guys that we wrestled every day in practice, and just kind of, all the buzz of the wrestling coaching staff, the
Mhm.
wrestlers stayed at the Archer Motel. We brought our Britt water down here, all that kind of good stuff. I remember, I think it was my junior year when Ron Finch, that was when the Rico Suave song was coming out. And
Yeah.
I remember Coach Finch calling me Rico Suave the whole time, and he'd sing the song. So yeah, it was a fun experience, a lot of
Yep.
fun.
And I'm a basketball guy, but the state wrestling tournament in Iowa is it's just a cool thing to be a part of. I've always enjoyed state wrestling stuff. So you were 105 and 26 in your 4 years. 22 of those 26 losses though were your freshman and sophomore year. So to break down your junior and senior year, were 70 and 4. I said that was a pretty impressive record there for 2 years. And two of those four losses were in the state championship match. So that's really even more impressive, the fact that two of those losses came in the biggest stage. Talk about Coach DeLeon a little bit, what he meant to you and his legacy.
Well, a lot. He was always the biggest supporter of his wrestlers. He'd go to battle for you, he'd run through fire for you. And growing up with John, John and I being friends from since we were born.
Mhm.
Remember my mom and his mom Lois, talking about sitting us together, taking a picture, calling us salt and pepper. So that was a lot of history and a lot of memories with the De Leon crew. But it going back to the early '70s, when there was all the wrestling success that we had, three state championships, team championships in a row,
Mhm.
numerous state champs, and then his success all the way up and through, the time that he retired. He was, he'd always want to get the best out of you. He'd push you to be your best. He was creative.
Mhm.
We still to this day laugh about the practice formats, and the pit in your stomach you'd feel a little bit when you walk in that wrestling room and you see the black flag, hanging on the wall.
Mhm.
His um, electrolyte pops that he'd make all the time, our relaxation drills, tapes that he'd record and put us through. It was he was just a great motivator, a great proponent, for the sport and for the kids. And it was just, especially in our era, just the great coaches we had, coaches and teachers in the school. It was we were very lucky, very
Yep.
fortunate, just with the core and the this the stability of a lot of those coaches and teachers that were around in the community of Britt, and and later on Britt and Kanawha for a lot of years. It was really something very impressive.
Yeah. I've talked with others, in some of these episodes. It's like, yeah, there'd be 15 years without a job opening at Brit because it just the same people would stay year after year, and that something to be said about longevity and stability. And with De Leon and your dad, I mean, there were two people that people would run through a brick wall for, and they didn't have to ask you to do that. It was just the respect we had for them and the way they went about their business. Yeah, just you'd do anything for those people.
And a lot of that was, you talk about. I mean, they paid their dues. They were there for a lot of years. Had really built successful programs in the communities, and um, that they had a lot of success.
Yep. All right, let's move on to track. I could not find much about your first 3 years. All I could find was your sophomore year. You qualified for state in the discus. Walk us through those first 3 years, just briefly, how you did individually as
Um,
a team, and then your senior year was kind of a big deal. So
yeah, yeah. So my sophomore year, I qualified for the state in the discus. Kind of a shock, really. I think we're over at Clear Lake, throwing in last chance meet, and that was we did it then. It was season performances, so it wasn't there's no district or anything. They had to qualify for the state meet. It was all timed or distances during the season, and had a perfect day to throw, caught one just right, and qualified. Went down the state track meet and didn't throw very well down there.
Yeah.
Didn't come close to placing or anything, but we had some other guys down there. And I can't remember what other events. I think we had maybe a 2-mile relay. Might have been my freshman year. I can't remember my sophomore year, all the events that we had down there. But moving on to junior year, we really had a ton of guys that year that started to run well. And, we had the 4x1, Nate, that's when Nate Smith kind of, burst on the scene as a freshman.
Yep.
He went in the 100-meter dash his freshman year. That tends to get noticed. And then, they won the 4x1 that year. It was him, Kevin Eisman, Jason Pavelka, and Chuck Christians. Jason Pavelka was a year older than us. He was a senior that year. And they won the 4x1. Nate won the 100. We placed in some other events. I was down there in the discus, didn't place in the discus. We scored some points. And then, senior year, then we just had and this is kind of true of, everything that all the sports with my class kind of coming through. I was pretty lucky to get to participate and compete with a lot of good athletes. My class, the grade ahead of me, and some of the older grades, and then obviously the classes behind me. We just had a lot of guys that were athletic, would compete, were we could really put together a lot of good teams. Senior year, then we had as you can see, Chuck, and so here in the picture, Chuck Christian starting in the lower left. It's Chuck Christians, Eric Rasmussen, John DeLeon, and there's Kevin Eisman, Jeremy Don. Got Nate there, Nate Smith in the lower right, and then of course my dad in the upper, starting the second row on the left-hand side, and then Eric Martian. Then there's myself, Dan Cooper, Brian Aitchison, and Al Love, and Eric Eisman, and then Coach Hauge over on the far right there. So that that was. We had some guys in that group that could run pretty well.
Yep. Yeah, you won the 4x2 with the group of guys, 1:30. You were third in the disc with 156.9 was your throw. How close were you to winning the discus that year at 156.9? What do you remember the winning throw?
Yeah, the winning throw I think was about I don't want to say it was 160 feet even. And a kid that I alluded to a little earlier from Eagle Grove, Chris Allen. He actually got second in the discus that year by an inch to a kid from the kid was a junior, and I don't remember where he was from. Brett Dahlfeld, I think was his name. I don't remember where he was from, Brett Dahlfeld. But I thought it was either going to be it was going to be myself and Chris Allen competing, and this kid kind of snuck in there and won the discus, and I actually was close, very close to not even making the final. I came out, we ran the prelims of the 4x2 that morning, went over to throw the discus, and I just couldn't get my steps down. And I qualified, I think they took 9 to the finals, and then they placed 8. And while I was the 9th qualifier to make the final with I think it was 140 something. And then fortunately kind of settled in and kind of found my groove and threw a little better in the finals, and was fortunate enough to move up there to third place.
Yeah. What was it like running track, throwing for your dad and Coach Hauge?
Was a lot of fun. My dad had done it for years. I'll say most of the time it was fun. Sometimes the running part for me was a little stressful. I had several times where even junior high coming up through, I'd get so nervous to run. I'd feel like I could hardly move.
Mhm.
And if for some reason running in track was one of the most nerve-wracking things for me. Um, but I tell you, I was able to run with some really good guys. We had some really good teams, and I really enjoyed throwing the disc with them. And my dad, a lot of times in track, he knew how to get the most out of a lot of the kids. He'd push them, and remember quarter miles going down the backstretch, he'd always yell. I remember him yelling, "Hammer down!"
Yep.
Get going, get moving. And then Coach Hauge, Coach Hauge was always kind of in the background. He'd be taking times on the clipboards. He'd have a stopwatch up there, writing all the times down, writing the splits. Remember my dad going back and forth, asking him, I had this for split. What'd you have? Comparing notes. And he kind of he did a lot of the legwork and organizing stuff kind of in the background, especially at meets, keeping tabs on things.
Yep.
And we just lots of memories of lots of years. Even when I wasn't there, the state track meet, we'd always be kind of camped up in that same
Yep.
location, same area of Drake Stadium.
There.
Yeah. And how could be situated up there. We'd make a run at whatever it was, whether it's winning a relay or winning an event, or heck, a lot of those years taking a run at the state title. So yeah, a lot of good memories.
Yeah, and I always say Coach Hauge, deserves a lot of credit for the success that your dad's team's always had, because he'd come out to practice 15, 20 minutes into practice, and one day we asked him, we just give him a hard time, "You're late, Coach," and he'd be like, he'd tell us he's doing this paperwork and doing, correspondence with the schools they're going to track meets to in the future. He just did all the stuff so your dad could free himself up to coach the team out on the track. And so I always thought Coach Hauge should get a lot of the credit for those championship teams and a lot of the good seasons they had.
No, you bet. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, it's in a lot of these cases, it's the getting recognition and notoriety. There's a lot of people in the background that are always contributing to it. And that's, the great thing, about West Hancock over the years. There's been a lot of community support, school support, assistant coaches, volunteer coaches, administration, just a lot of people behind, whether it's athletics or other activities. And, that all goes hand in hand, because as you know, Dan, once you leave the community, or you get older and experience, the atmospheres in different places, not everywhere is like that.
No.
It really has been, especially just the longevity with a lot of the success over a lot of years. It's a lot to be said for the school
definitely.
and Britt and Kanawha.
Yep, and I honestly appreciated the banquets that your dad would host for track and football and stuff, and he would thank 712 people at those things, but he knew it's more than just him. It's more than just the staff. There's so many people that it takes to make a successful season or run at a championship, like you said. So, last thing about track, did you guys ever have puke practices?
Well, I don't know if we'd call them puke practices, but I'd puke.
That's what we called them.
Yeah.
Your dad would say, "We're going to do 400s until someone throws up," and one of us weight boy linemen who would just show up to practice just to get ready for football season, after about the fourth one of us would just kind of stick the finger in the mouth, and he'd shake his head and say, "One more and go home." That's how it used to go. So
400s, 600s, 300s. I mean, those were at least what I would have to run. Those were, I remember running 300s.
Yep.
Those were, I'm not even going to lie and say they were fun. They weren't fun, but they were productive, right? Say they were productive.
Yep. One last thing I just thought of about your dad and Coach Hauge. Hauge would come out after being inside for a little bit and sit on the infield bleacher. And like 2 or 3 days before our first meet, we'd always do like a pre-meet practice where he'd have the gun and he'd shoot it off, and we'd use the blocks, obviously, and we'd kind of simulate a track meet. And one day we're stretching, and your dad has the gun up to his ear, and he's banging on it because it's not working, and he keeps messing with it. And he shot that thing off right here. We all jumped about 3 feet off the ground. We were sitting on the ground stretching, and he didn't flinch like didn't even move an inch. He just kept kind of messing with it. And Coach Hauge didn't even move either. He was just, yep, gun went off. I don't think he was even facing your dad when that thing shot off, and neither of them bothered to move. And we all about crapped our pants. So
Yeah, well, sometimes wasn't uncommon. Sometimes my dad's hearing wasn't the best, but you sure would think a starter pistol beside your ear, you'd hear that one, right?
I'm sure he heard it. It just didn't. He didn't care. It just went off, and kept on going with his day. So
Yeah.
all right, let's move on to football here. I saved the football for last. You played for your dad from '88 to '91, and anyone who follows the football program or has a record book knows that equaled 3 playoff trophies. And you got to play with Kevin that first year in '88, his senior year. Got to play in the semifinals. Your freshman year, like I said, you guys went to the semis. You were 8-3. Statistically, I just went to the record book. You had 1 kickoff return for 21 yards, a fumble recovery, and 11 tackles. Did you regularly play, or was that more at like the end of a kind of a blowout, or were you in the mix a little bit there your freshman year?
Kind of a combination. I had, let's see, we had the Northwood Kensett game. Scott Van Dusseldorp was a starting inside linebacker. He was a sophomore that year. I was a freshman, and I think it was his knee. He had gotten hurt. He couldn't play in that game. So I played inside linebacker that whole game. We lost to Northwood Kensett, unfortunately. Hopefully, mostly wasn't all my doing, but being a freshman out there, I don't know how well the contribution was, but. And then mostly it was towards the end of games, cleanup duty, if you will. And then I started playing a little more as we got in the playoffs. So it was, I guess, as we made the playoff run, we played, I think it was Ida Grove was our first round game. We went out there.
28.
Yeah, really exciting one. Windy night. Remember that? Kind of a real big back and forth game. And then Akron Westfield, we played in the next round, traveled out. I don't remember where that game was at. Maybe that was
Albert City, probably.
Albert City, maybe was where the game was at. Yeah. And then then we played Grundy Center in the semis. So yeah, I kind of, as we got in the playoffs, I played quite a bit more on offense in a lot of those games, and then got kind of spotted in there on defense. But yeah, that was a really fun season. Obviously with my dad being the coach, my older brother being a senior, getting the opportunity to play, with him in that senior class. A lot of guys that, I'd looked up to, had mentioned, Joel Jurdy and Greg Byers and Brian Nedved and a lot of guys in that class that were my brother's friends that, that I looked up to and got to play with, for a little bit. And just it was the excitement of going and playing in the Dome, getting down there and playing in the state semifinals. Growing up, obviously I'd been, to most all of these football games on Friday nights. I remember, we go back to, I remember the 1980 bits and pieces of the 1980 team that, we had like Robbie Whipple and Jeff Moeller and a bunch of those guys that I think we had one loss and didn't make the playoffs.
That would have been 81, actually. Yep.
Was that 81?
81.
Okay.
Yep. Lost to Osage 14-12. I think was their only loss.
14-12. That sounds right. Okay. And then 82 and 83. I didn't go back and look at the records, but we were over 500 those 2 years, right? But
something like that.
Didn't make playoffs, and then we kind of started the run, which really started in 84 with a lot of those guys. I think that senior class, like. It was Jeff Kelly, Chris Fisher,
Don Hiscox, that group.
Who else?
Don Hiscox, I think, was in that group.
Yep. I think Don Hiscox. Yep. And then, and then that kind of made just watching a lot of those games and watching a lot of those teams, looking up to a lot of those guys, and then getting to be a freshman, actually be able to put the pads on in a high school capacity and go out there and play was pretty. Almost surreal for a freshman in high school to go down there and play in the, like I said, in the Unidome. And my brother, he would always give me a hard time still to this day. We had a couple plays in that semifinal game that we were 14-7 was the final in that game. and I had a little out, was a wing, ran down the sideline. He threw a ball. Kevin threw the ball right in the money. I mistimed my jump, didn't catch it, dropped it, and came back to huddle, and he had a few choice words for me, and he still gives me a hard time about it to this day. But we joke about it, we laugh, and then
Can't believe that out of Kevin. I just don't buy that.
yeah. We but boy, I'd say we had him on the ropes, and that was, we lost to Grundy Center the season before in the state finals, and they had a lot of guys back. Obviously, we lost a really good senior class the season before with Pat Kelly, Nick Smith, Jim Cheezick, a bunch of those guys, Jeremy Hill, and so they were coming back, and Grundy Center had a bunch of guys back, a really good senior class that year that had played in the state championship as juniors, and we came down towards the end of the game, and we were really we had them on their heels. They were, and we had an opportunity to score towards the end of the game, and kind of came up a little bit short. I actually remember being in the end zone and jumping to catch the ball again, and there were some defenders there, but I can kind of still feel the ball in your hands.
Yeah.
Just couldn't quite bring it down. But that was a really fun group. And our seniors were lean that year. We didn't have very many of them, but they were really good leaders and good players, and made for a really fun season.
Yep. Yeah, and then sophomore year, 89, you guys went 6-2, did not qualify for the playoffs though. You only scored 205 points that season. There's some low scoring affairs, lost a couple close games, weren't blowing anybody out. Did the merger with Kanawha affect you guys at all? Did you guys get along pretty well?
Yeah, I think we got along great. I mean, for the most part. I mean, I guess the only effect it would have necessarily had was it bumped us up a class. We went from 1A to 2A. So we lost a couple close games that year, like Osage, I think it was 6-0. We lost to Forest City in overtime when we were ahead by a couple scores against Forest City, and then we didn't play well at the end of the game, and then we got beaten overtime. So I mean, if we were a 1A school, 6-2 record, playing those bigger schools, a 6-2 record probably gets you in the playoffs. But us being a 2A school, didn't get us in the playoffs that year. And we didn't score a ton of points offensively. Towards the end of the season that year, Steve Kelly, it hurt his knee. So he, that was latter, it was kind of mid to late season, I guess, that Steve got hurt. So that he was one of our running backs, one of the seniors that year, so he was a, big part of the team. But we had a lot of guys coming back from the year before that had played. That senior class, we had, Brett Nedved, mentioned Steve Kelly, Ricky Whipple, and then some guys from Kanawha that had come over that were good football players. Richie Ziegler, Corey Meyer played a lot that year. And it was, I think we gelled pretty well. We had a good team. We were playing a lot better at the end of the year than we were at the beginning of the year, but just didn't quite, lost, like you said, a couple close games and just didn't quite get in playoffs that year.
Yep. You individually, though, you became more of a regular. Scored 21 points, 9 of those being PATs. Had an interception on defense. Running the ball, 100 carries, 551 yards, 2 touchdowns. You were the main guy kicking off after scores, and had 21 tackles. So you could kind of tell you went from part-timer to more full-timer that sophomore year. And then junior year, 1990, you guys went 7-2. You won the conference. You lost to Garner in the regular season. You beat North Iowa Buffalo Center by 11 in the regular season. And then the first round of the playoffs lost 13-12, to which I'm pretty sure is still North Iowa's only playoff win in school history in 1990. You individually scored 65 points, 132 rushes for 891 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 fumble recoveries, and 55 tackles. What do you remember about that 1990 season?
I remember that North Iowa game. That's what I remember about that 1990 season. We still talk about it. I talk with Kevin Eisman and Travis Hagan, and Travis, we were lining up actually kick a field goal at the end of the game to win the game. And unfortunately Kevin had turned, threw a ball out to the flat to kill the clock. And the officials called it intentional grounding instead of a throw to stop the clock.
Yeah. And
I don't know why you call that intentional grounding at that point in the game. We never threw the ball anyway, so we were just throwing it to stop the clock. And then when Travis addressed the ball, came up top the ball to hike it, and you watched the clock tick down 2-1-0 as time ran out. Remember in the south end zone up there in North Iowa, unfortunately. But yeah, we had a really good team that year. We had a big win over Osage, 34-0. We hadn't beaten Osage that bad in I don't know how long, probably since the 1973 season. Yeah. And that was a huge win. We Lake Mills. The thing I remember too about that season, I think there was 4 teams in our conference that made the playoffs. So we had Lake Mills, Garner, us, and then who would the other one been? Garner, us, North Iowa, obviously. North Iowa, yeah. Those 4. And we had just a really good conference, and that was kind of the theme all the way through. But especially my junior and senior year, we had a lot of good teams and everything in all different sports around the area and in the conference. And that year, we went over to Garner, and it was one of those games where we just felt like we beat the tar out of them. We just kind of physically got after them, and we lost the game. We had a couple turnovers, bad timing on turnovers, and just couldn't get rolling. But and not to take any away from Garner, they had a good squad that year. But game we felt like we should have won. And then North Iowa, they had early in the season, it was one of those games where they had a lot of good athletes. They had they had the twin boys, Reed and Ryan.
Was it Gertis?
No. Yeah.
I know who you're talking about. I just can't think of their names.
Yeah. They had a twin. Actually, they were triplets. I think they had a sister too. There was 2 boys and a girl.
Oh, Meyer.
Yes. Yep. Was it Meyer? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And and some of those, they had good athletes, good group. But again, we got them in the regular season, and then we let it slip away in the playoffs, and we were really looking forward to, and maybe that was part of our problem. We were looking forward to getting the opportunity to play Emmitsburg.
Yep.
We had none of us had played Emmitsburg, and that would have been the next round game after the first round of playoffs. But never got there.
Yep, Emmitsburg took it to North Iowa in that game by about 3 touchdowns, I'm pretty sure. So.
Yep. North Iowa got beat up, I think.
Yep. Senior year, 91. I was almost hesitant to bring this season up because I know that last game brings back some bad memories for you guys. But
yeah,
you were 8-1, and you were the last ever North Iowa Conference champions. So you still had a good accomplishment there. You statistically, individually, 111 points scored, 196 runs for 1,334 yards, 15 touchdowns, caught 5 passes for 99 yards, which in the world of West Hancock football, that's pretty high up there in some of the records. You had 2 receiving touchdowns, made 14 PATs, had 2 interceptions, and a team leading 96 tackles, as well as 2 fumble recoveries. So obviously the Garner games are what stand out, and I know some people don't like to hear about this, but you beat them 29-6 in the regular season, then 19-12 you lost to them in the first round of the playoffs. If you don't want to go into too many details about the game itself, talk about the rivalry with Garner you guys had in the early 90s. What was that like, having the West Hancock Garner games?
Oh, it was a big rivalry. That was a time they had very good football teams during that time. And so did we. We had bumped heads. The year before they'd beaten us, and that was the first time Garner had beaten us in a long time. I don't want to say ever, but in a really long time. I think in 90, and then in 91, they had a group that we hadn't beat all the way up through some of the younger age groups. Maybe junior high we'd beaten them, but they beat us in JV. And so we were looking, and obviously we wanted a little payback from the season before. And the first game we played, it was a 1 versus 2 matchup. They were rated number 1 in the state in 2A. We were rated number 2, and I just remember us walking out around the school. I mean, we were going home from school, or we were coming back to get ready, just to for the game. Not even close to going out for warm-ups or anything. Just going into the school to start putting pads on and getting taped up and get ready to go. And there was cars all over the place. There's people all over the place. Yeah. And I remember walking out, came around the corner of the school and kind of around the utility shed that sits there kind of close to where the playground area and the discus and rings are. And our entire stands were full. Yeah. We came around the corner and I mean, the stands were full. There was people lined up around the fences. It was really electric atmosphere. And it was an awesome atmosphere. And I think it was my dad's birthday. That first game we actually played in 91 on October 11th. And we got after him pretty good. We played pretty well. It was a really fun game. Then we circled back around, 3 weeks later, and we didn't play as well. Really cold, miserable, windy night. I won't get into too many details of the game. We just didn't quite get it done. We had some opportunities, pass interference call at the very end of the game that really kind of shut the door on us. And then, finished, we were down by 7, 19-12. And then we didn't have an opportunity to play any more offense. And then they went through the playoffs and beat everybody by 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, they were untouched.
Yeah, they which and we talked about this in hindsight because we're kind of back to the North Iowa Conference and the area being really good that year. Osage, we like to call ourselves if we weren't the best, we're the second best team in 2A that year, and Osage was probably the third best team because they played both us and Garner really tough. They had a close, I think, a 1 touchdown game with Garner, and we beat them I think it was 20-6 in a game where Kevin Eisman had a very good game when we played Osage. I think he had a couple bootlegs for touchdowns and I think he had a couple interceptions. Just had an exceptional game. But it was again good. Just a testament to the quality we had in North Iowa in the conference that year.
Yep. Number 1, did your dad even know it was his birthday that day?
I don't know.
Probably
Maybe.
not.
I don't think he was probably very concerned about his birthday now.
And number 2, talk about the story. Someone told me that you had to wear someone else's jersey in a game. Something happened.
Yeah.
So
that was
the stats might be a little skewed.
Yeah, that would have been Garner my junior year. So we were over there at Garner. I wore number 2. We I was 4 brothers. Kevin was 1. I was 2. Jeff 3. Mark 4. And I had my 2 jersey on, and for whatever reason, my sophomore year I'd worn a big neck roll, and we thought it was cool. Was it for protection? Probably not. I just thought it would look cool. And then we cut our jerseys, so we had to. It wouldn't really fit around the neck roll, and we kind of had the part of the jersey that would rub against your neck here over top your pad. So we'd cut the mesh, and then it had looped some strings in there we kind of tied strings in there to keep it from tearing any further. Well, we were, I think it was the first half of the game over there at Garner, and we were running an outside trap, and someone had reached out and grabbed the back of my jersey, and I just kind of kept running, and the jersey tore, and they about ripped it right off my back. So I had to go over and we just grabbed somebody's jersey off the sideline, and my junior year, so they grabbed a freshman, said, "Hey, give me your jersey." It happened to be Ted Smith. So he peeled his jersey off, and I wore 45 for the rest of the game. And so I think when I was running the ball or making a tackle, the announcer over at Garner would announce Ted's name each time. Ted Smith on the tackle.
Yep. So you should be a little higher up on the rushing list in the record book, but Ted
maybe
yards. So Yep.
Maybe I tried to stack Ted's stats a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. Yep. Speaking of statistically, defensively, you guys were pretty darn good in those last 2 years. You guys have some Sanger era records: least rushing yards allowed in a season, average yards given up in a game, total yards allowed in a season. You're pretty much top five in any of those type of defensive categories. Shutouts too. You were just one of many very good defensive players. Talk about some of those guys you played with on defense.
Oh man, we had some good ones. I mean, my junior year, those couple of seasons, Travis Hagan, nose guard. Remember, Scott B was a linebacker. Tim Raber was a linebacker. Doug Weiland played a corner. I go down the list with those guys. Some of those guys that were a year older than me. And then, my senior year, as I keep saying, we had a really good group, not only of our class, but some of the guys that were younger than us. But Kevin Eastman, Eric Rasmussen, John DeLeon playing back there in the secondary. Had Benji Swears played linebacker next to me. Then we had Chad Trolson. I'm trying to go across the line. Kerry Hudspeth, Derek Sink, Sean Shahan, and some of these guys are going to reach out and say you forgot to mention my name, but I'm gonna draw a blank on some of them. But yeah, we just had a good class, a good group. And Coach Perkins, we always said if nobody scores on us, we can't lose.
Yeah.
So defense was a big emphasis, and we took a lot of pride in it. And even going back now and watching some of the films, game film from back then, we just had kids that would just fly to the ball. We'd play tough defense, and we had guys that could run, and they would run to the ball, and when they got there, they were ornery, right? They were they wanted to make the tackle. So it was a lot of fun playing defense, and I liked it. Obviously in high school, I was much more offensive minded. You gotta play offense. We gotta run the ball and score points. And I want to say I rested on defense, but compared to offense, I think sometimes I took a little break on defense, and we had a lot of good players.
So I was just gonna say, you had all those other guys that could pick it up.
Yep.
Yeah. So your football career, 29-8 overall record in your 4 years, 2 conference titles, 3 playoff trips. And one thing that stood out to me when I was putting these numbers together, 29-8 in West Hancock in a 4-year span. In a couple of those eras, really, that's not even top 5 in terms of a record. And you mentioned, what do you remember about this season? I remember that loss. I remember when we lost this game. When you're in that good of a program, that's what stands out, is when you didn't do well. We won 80+% of our games, but it's that 20% that stands out because you're just used to that success. It's just crazy how that works. I have a whole list of stats here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you're top 5, 10, or 15 in a lot of categories in the record book. But you guys also fell victim to poor reporting back then. I have every game article from your dad's whole career on flash drives. And the Britt News Tribune, I think they lost that guy that they had for many years around that time. And a lot of the articles didn't even have stats at all, didn't really have the game analysis or anything. So some of the stats you and your teammates are have in the record book are probably a lot better than they, or a lot worse than they should be, because there just wasn't the data to put the book
Yeah,
together
it could be.
with some of your seasons.
Randy Truesdale. I remember Randy Truesdale was the newspaper, the main sports he did sports coverage, and that was, I don't remember what year that he left, but my early high school, junior high days, he was covering a lot of that.
Yeah.
When we made that first couple years, we were in the finals and runner up. I know Randy was covering that, but I don't remember which year he left.
Yeah, it was probably 89 or so would be my guess, because that's when I realized there was a couple year dip there where I didn't have a whole lot to go with doing the record book. So yeah, so after high school you went on to Central College. You followed Kevin. You played football and not ran track, but you threw
Didn't run,
track
yeah.
team there. Yeah. College record, you guys were 38-4 in your 4 seasons on the football team. In 1995, which would have been your senior season, you were a finalist for the Gagliardi Award, which is the equivalent of the D3 Heisman Award. What was that like being up for that award? What do you remember? Did you get to go out somewhere for an award ceremony, or was it not like that back then?
Yeah, we got to go out to Salem, Virginia. So they played the D3 championship out in Salem, Virginia. So
Stag
we
Bowl.
got to Stag Bowl. Yep. And the award, the Gagliardi Award, is named after John Gagliardi, coached for years up at St. John's, Minnesota. So it was a really cool experience. Got to go out and attend a clinic, um, and work with kids at a football clinic and meet some of the other finalists. Actually, a kid that won it that year, I think, was a receiver from St. John's.
Okay.
So got to meet a lot of them. Watched the championship game that year, which was a little bittersweet for us because we really thought we had a good enough group to be there. And to a degree, it was a little bittersweet for me even to be a finalist for the Gagliardi Trophy because my college roommate was Mark Kakmarinsky, who was preseason player of the year in D3, broke his leg third game of the season against Wartburg. So that kind of, we had a really good year. We finished undefeated, and then got bit by the bug the playoff bug. Didn't win a lot of playoff games in the course of my career, but we beat Wartburg during the regular season my junior year, and then got beat by Wartburg in the playoffs my junior year, and then we got beat by Wisconsin River Falls my senior year, first round of playoffs. So, but the fact that kind of turned us upside down from an offensive standpoint when you have your Division III Player of the Year breaks his leg from an offensive perspective, and then like I said, bittersweet. It was a great honor to be a finalist for that award, but I would have much rather had CAC around and have him playing and be a finalist for that award.
Yeah. And to me, it's impressive that you won that or you were a finalist as a defensive player. Those type of awards are usually quarterbacks and running backs for the most part, occasionally a wide receiver. But to be that as a linebacker is pretty cool. And you guys also won 2 conference titles. I still call it the IAC. I have a hard time calling it the American Rivers Conference now, but 2 IAC championships. You had 373 career tackles, which I think is tied for 5th with a guy I was in college with, Andrew Lane. I think you guys are tied for career tackles. You had 129 of them in 1994. In one game against Loras in 94, you had 24 tackles, which is tied for a school record. You were the team MVP and a co-captain as well. And I was just going to bring up real quick a CAC story. I played in the alumni game in 2009, and CAC played, and he was wearing, I think, his Indianapolis Colts helmet. And he ran the ball once, and a linebacker for Central named Greg Best hit him pretty good, put him on the ground, and Greg was kind of an arrogant player, and he kind of stood over CAC and said something, and CAC got back to the huddle and said, "Give it to me again." He took the ball again, and he sought that kid out, and he got a little payback on him. I'm like, dude, that kid hasn't played in almost 15 years, and he was still had that fire under him. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like CAC. That sounds like CAC.
Yep, I was a little intimidated playing in that game with some of those guys. Before we move on to your track experiences there real quick, I talked to a guy named Don DeWaard today, your linebackers coach, defensive coordinator. He's my next guest on the podcast, and I said, "What do you have to say about Rick Sanger?" And he said he was a unique blend of speed and power. He was able to get to the football quickly and packed a big punch when he got there. He and Dan Zimmerman were one of the best duos at inside backer I ever coached. So I just wanted to share that with you from Coach DeWaard.
It's quite an honor. Yep, love Coach DeWaard. He was a great coach to have. Very intense, and Zim and I, Dan Zimmerman. He was for my sophomore through senior years. We started together inside linebacker, and that was a lot of fun. And Coach DeWaard, we have some good stories about Coach DeWaard, but he was a good one.
Yep, I was his assistant student coach from 06 and 07, and I switched to wide receivers. Did you guys do Friday Night Heat?
Oh, you bet. Yeah, we had Friday Night Heat. We always
break any fingers?
Tried to keep fingers from getting broke.
Yep. I I just stood there in awe of that thing. And one time he goes, "Do you want to do it?" And I'm like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm good. I would break a finger." So,
Yeah.
yep, he's a
Yep.
great guy, and he's a Kanawha grad, so he'll be on next. Track, and then we'll get to Coach Skipper here in a minute too. Track, you were a 3-time conference champion in the disc, and you placed 4 times. What else about track do you remember at Central?
Some really long car rides and vans rides to some of the
Flippy?
track meets. Yeah, we had some good track teams. When I was in school, I was a thrower again. Didn't run in college, but started throwing the shot put a little bit more when I was in college, and then discus. Continued through the discus all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
We had this boy won the conference. I want to say 3 times, my freshman, sophomore, junior year. Then we had a bunch of injuries. Kevin took over actually as a head coach then my senior year. And we didn't win the conference that year. We had a bunch of some of our best sprinters that had pulled hamstrings and just a lot of injuries. And then obviously Kevin after that went on and had a ton of success with the track program.
Pretty good.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. Complemented football a little bit. Spring football, they kind of ran over one another. But a lot of the guys that I played football with were also on the track team. Guys in my class like Dan Zimmerman, the other linebacker, he was a multiple time All-American sprinter. And DeWaard used to always laugh and say, "Come on, Sanger, why don't you run like that?" And I was like, Coach, that's probably not going to quite happen. And then Steve Brand was a really good track athlete too, really good strong safety, who played down there. So it was just, small college. You're able to do a couple different sports, and a lot of the same guys that are participating in both of them. So it was, we had a lot of trips, a lot of fun times, a lot of success with the team. But it was a good experience.
Yep. And that's one thing I enjoy with you Sanger guys. I went to Central. I'm from Britt, so I just love hearing and any Central stuff, and having that connection with you guys is pretty fun. Coach Skipper, what can you say about Skip? I never got to meet the guy. He passed away just a couple months before I got to Central. You got to play for him, and he retired after the '96 season, so a year after you were gone. He hung it up. What can you say about Skip?
Yep. Skip was, one of a kind. He was, very instrumental just in a lot of things at Central. A builder of young men and teaching you to, play the game correctly, be a gentleman. He'd always talk about be a gentleman, be a student, be an athlete. So he kind of had the priorities of things in the right order, and he man of faith that he shared that with everybody around him, and just a great role model. He's a great leader, and he did things right. So it was a lot of I still look back and in hindsight, fortunate with the people that you've had as mentors or you've had in your life. And obviously my dad, through high school, through all of my life as a coach, and then having Coach Skipper in college. Not only Coach Skipper, Coach DeWaard, a lot of the coaches that were on the coaching staff were very great people, great coaches, and just really good mentors and role models to have.
Yep, he had Coach Bowser as well. I got to know Bowser pretty well. He's a great guy, and
he is.
Neat places to be, and a lot of great people. Speaking of great people, let's talk about your dad and your mom a little bit. What do they mean to you growing up and to this day?
Well, it's kind of a hard question. We don't know any different, right? Us 4 boys, we used to always get the question growing up, what's it like having your dad as a coach and your mom? What's it like having dad and mom as coaches and teachers? And the answer always was, well, we don't know any different. So we don't know what it's like to not have them, as coaches and teachers. When you move on and into college and into the the working world, you're able to look back and kind of recognize kind of what a special experience that was. It's hard to probably overstate the influence that obviously our parents, my dad and mom, have had on us, all of us boys, as well as a lot of thousands of other kids that have come through the school and communities of Britt and Kanawha. But I guess I'll just say I was lucky. My brothers and myself were pretty lucky to have the parents that we had, and to go through a lot of experiences that we had through Central and since that time. So.
Yeah, and like you said, thousands of other people, and it got me kind of thinking, like, you guys almost shared your parents with everybody to a degree. I mean, obviously you're their sons, but at the same time, your parents felt like some of the closest people to me that I've ever had in my life. So it's been just an honor for me to know your folks as well. The day your dad passed, I about went home from school. I got to school and found out. I about went home. I mean, that my high school football coach meant that much to me. That's not, like you said, it's not the same everywhere. That doesn't happen all the time. He was just a great guy, and your mom. We have a lot of respect for your mom as well. Her work ethic is what always stood out to me. I'd get to school early some days, and I'd be like, "Hey, Miss Sanger, how you doing?" She goes, "Good, getting a lot." She said, "I've already been here for 3 hours or whatever." She'd be there early. You'd be
Yep.
there after practice, and she'd still be there doing stuff, and she'd always had time for you. So I always appreciated that about your mom. So, speaking of your folks, to wrap this up here, Rick, again, I want to thank Jan and Jim Timmerman for sponsoring this episode by donating to the Legacy Fund. Go to sangerstrong.com. I can't talk to do that. Message me that you have, and I'll have you mentioned on the next one. Thanks again to the Timmermans for doing that. Coming up here in about 2 weeks, I have Coach DeWaard on. He's a Kanawha grad and the Central College football coach for many years. We're going to talk a lot of Kanawha and a lot of Dutch football. He was a mentor to me when I was in Pella, and he's currently the mayor of Pella, so we're going to talk a little tulip time. After that is the 1986 girls state champion golf team, and then your buddy John DeLeon. I'll be talking to him about his time at Britt and his dad, and then Stacey and Seth Goepel, Nate Schreur, one of your baseball buddies you mentioned earlier, and then I'll have the 1980 girls state basketball championship team, and then one of your teammates, Chad Trolson. And just today, I actually lined up my next two episodes, like 15 and 16 or something like that. Chuck Boozman, who was a coach with your dad for many years, and then Russ King. He was the head coach the 2 years before your dad got to Britt in 1966, 67. I just lined up today. I was going to try to get him on earlier, and they actually had COVID this winter and were kind of struggling. And so he said, reach back out to me in April and I'll see how we're feeling. So I'm going to have them on sometime this summer. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for some of those episodes. And then also I mentioned last time, it sounds like the school is going to name the press box after Denny Brum. I'm pretty excited about that. Awesome. So thanks again for everybody for pestering the administration to make that happen. So Denny's very deserving of that. Rick, before we head out, any final things you want to say to everybody that's going to be watching this? At least the 500 viewers.
Tell you what,
Kevin.
I'm going to try to get to 500, huh?
Well,
it's okay. We can always turn into competition. Kevin and I love competing against stuff.
Exactly. That's what I figured.
I tell you, Dan, I just want to say thank you, for your time and energy in the stat book that you put together. Just doing these podcasts, having the guests on, I think it's great. Seeing the people reminiscing, supporting communities of Britt and Kanawha, and in the school, and your support for the the Sanger Legacy Fund. We hope to really do some good things with that down the road here. So I just want to say thank you, Dan.
You bet. Thank you, Rick. And again, I can't plug the Legacy Fund enough. We want to keep that thing going. We have a meeting next week on this Zoom thing that we want to kind of take those next steps. So we're pretty excited for that. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching, and go Eagles.